Over the past few days, I've spent countless hours testing builds in Onslaught on my stream over at twitch.tv/Bactix, and very few things came anywhere near the strength of this overpowered Warlock build. In a mode where your best chances of success come from shutting down choke points that waves of enemies funnel into, a build that blinds and basically one-shots anything on screen fits hand in glove. So let me show you how it all works. Things begin with the Vesper of Radius exotic chest piece, which causes your Rift class ability to periodically emit arc shockwaves that deal massive damage and blind all nearby targets. Furthermore, final blows with these shockwaves will also create arc explosions, dealing even more damage and also blinding any nearby targets in a chain reaction domino effect fashion. And for the icing on the cake, while wearing this exotic chest piece, you gain significantly increased class ability regeneration when surrounded by enemy targets, beginning with 250% bonus class ability regen when surrounded by 3 enemies, climbing all the way up to 1500% class ability regen when surrounded by 6 or more enemies. Because of all these benefits, the best way to utilize this build is to play extremely aggressive, getting up into the face of enemies to lock down choke points with your rifts that blind them so they can't even shoot back, or, if you're quick enough, jumping into the enemy spawn locations for a particular wave and sending them back as quick as they come in. Just make sure you don't do this on an explosive shank or cursed thrall wave for obvious reasons. It's probably worth noting now as well that I highly recommend the Healing Rift class ability for this setup, as while you take basically 0 damage once you are set up due to the fact that everything is blinded, having that surge of healing to protect against enemies that have not yet been blinded is very reassuring for a build that has you playing as aggressively as this one. As far as our exotic in the weapons department goes, you can genuinely use whatever you want. However, my absolute favorite selection was the Witherhoard exotic grenade launcher, which, as I'm sure you all know, deploys a blighted puddle to further eviscerate any enemies trying to push through your choke points. I also loved this weapon for dealing with tankier enemies like saboteurs that, while blinded and unable to fight back, could still sometimes get past my rift due to their massive health bars, especially on later waves. Being able to directly hit the enemy to deal massive damage over time, so I could then turn my focus back onto the oncoming waves of newly spawned enemies, just made things really convenient, especially thanks to its catalyst that grants the auto-loading holster perk so that I could pull out my other weapon to fire away on the other enemies. Speaking of other weapons, you can't go wrong with any close-range arc primary ammo weapon for this build, with things like Brigand's Law and the Ikelos SMG being absolute superstars. However, personally, I found the most success with the newly craftable Subjunctive SMG obtainable from Riven in the Helm. More specifically, I crafted this weapon with small bore, tactical mag, threat detector for significantly increased reload speed, stability, and handling while near enemies, and finally, Golden Tricorn, a slightly complex perk with highly underrated benefits. With Golden Tricorn, getting a kill with the weapon immediately grants a 15% damage buff for 7 seconds, which is already pretty solid, but what's more is that when getting a grenade or melee ability kill while in possession of the buff that also matches the element of the weapon damage archetype, aka getting arc ability kills while having an arc weapon, this 15% damage buff jumps up to a whopping 50% damage buff for 10 seconds, the duration of which can be refreshed with follow-up matching ability kills. While the Vesper of Radius Rift shockwaves unfortunately do not count as ability kills in this context, the rest of our build will feature a plethora of ways to refund a ton of pulse grenade and ball lightning melee ability energy for this purpose. Getting to that as a matter of fact, let's talk about our first aspect, Arc Soul, where rifts created by the user grant an Arc Soul to anyone that passes through it, refreshing the duration of the Arc Soul by either remaining in the rift or stepping back into it. Furthermore, while amplified, acquired through Arc multi-kills or a few other methods that we will discuss in a moment, the Arc Soul increases its firing speed to 5 round bursts instead of its base 3, taking its overall rounds per minute to 225, which, fun fact, actually matches that of the firing speed of the Sentient Arc Soul from the Getaway Artist exotic gloves. The more you know. But this aspect helps us in even more ways as well, especially when it comes to the Vesper of Radius Rift placement loop, as while near allies, you gain increased class ability regeneration rate, with one ally giving you a 40% increase, 2 granting 80%, and 3 granting 120%, which means that standing next to any living thing, friend or foe, will result in increased class ability regeneration to enable more frequent blinding arc shockwave action. Moving to aspect number 2, we have Electrostatic Mind, a staple on any Arc Warlock build that generates Ionic Traces, a pickup that refunds ability energy to all 3 of your basic abilities whenever you defeat an enemy with an Arc ability kill. Additionally, this aspect also makes you amplified when scavenging those generated Ionic Traces. Remember that amplified is a buff that provides a ton of stat benefits, key amongst them the speed booster buff, and with this build, a juiced up Arc Soul. And what's funny is that in addition to grenade and melee ability kills obviously counting as ability kills to generate Ionic Traces through this aspect, Arc Soul final blows and final blows from the Vesper of Radius Rift shockwaves also count as ability kills in this context and will therefore also generate Ionic Traces. Furthermore, this aspect also generates Ionic Traces when defeating Arc debuffed targets as well, which conveniently includes any blinded enemy that will be occurring frequently thanks to our Vesper of Radius Rifts. With the 4 fragment slots allotted to us with these aspects, we are going to populate them with the Spark of Resistance for significantly increased damage resistance when surrounded by enemies, the Spark of Magnitude to increase the duration of our Pulse Grenade, the Spark of Shock to grant our Pulse Grenades the ability to jolt enemy targets, and the Spark of Ions to generate an Ionic Trace when defeating jolted targets, which by the way double dips with the Arc debuff Ionic Trace generation effect of Electrostatic Mind, allowing you to spawn 2 Ionic Traces from a single defeated enemy. It is also for this reason that you could alternatively opt into the Chain Lightning melee ability, which while much shorter range can jolt enemies that it hits, as opposed to the more ranged Ball Lightning melee ability. At the end of the day, it depends how aggressively you plan on playing, with Ball Lightning being for the less aggressive and less practiced players, while Chain Lightning might benefit you a bit more if you're more comfortable getting up in everything's face. Finally, moving to our armor mod setup, we begin on the helmet with a copy of Harmonic Siphon for orb generation on arc weapon multi-kills, and 2 copies of Dynamo for a huge bump to our super energy bar when casting our rift near enemies, which with the amount of rifts you are casting will have your Chaos Reach available basically every 60 seconds. On the gloves, you'll want to spec into ability cycling with a copy of Impact Induction for grenade energy refund on powered melee damage, and copies of Bolstering Detonation and Focusing Strike for class ability energy refund on grenade and melee damage respectively. On the chest, it's business as usual with resistance mods matching the damage type of incoming enemies. Moving to the boots, you'll want a Harmonic Scavenger for your Arc Heavy weapon, as well as 2 copies of Arc Weapon Surge for a 17% Arc Weapon damage bonus. And finally, on the class item, you'll gain 3 different benefits when casting your Rift, with a copy of Bomber for grenade energy refund, Powerful Attraction to scoop up all nearby orbs of power, and Reaper to generate an orb of power on your next weapon final blow. And with stat prioritizations of Resilience, Discipline, and Intellect, you're all set to get that Destiny item manager link down in the description. Tag those like and subscribe buttons if you enjoyed the video, and then head on over to my live stream at twitch.tv/Mactix to learn about even more new builds, come run Onslaught with me, or to just hang out. I'll see you over there. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.